Thanks, Alan, for inviting me to speak on the St. Croix. I have worked on the St. Croix for probably 10 or 15 years. When I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I retired 4 years ago and began to dedicate my time to Chief Akaji as his advisor to St. Croix restoration. And so I've continued my work, and that's been very satisfying. But today, what I'd like to talk about is something that others probably have not covered, and that is a little bit of the history of the river and how it's been divided by the border and the events that have taken place on the river that have changed its ecological standing. So first of all, I just want to say that the St. Croix has the largest potential to produce herring, that's alewives and blueback herring, of any river in North America, probably. Certainly in Maine and Atlantic Canada. But it doesn't meet that potential. And it hasn't met that potential since the beginning of the 1800s when dams started to be built. So what I'd like to do is talk about what its ecological connection should be, what its potential is, a little bit about what happened to reduce its production, and where we want to go from here, and why it's important. So somebody might say, why do you want to restore the St. Croix River? Well, one of the answers is that we'd like to reinvigorate the Passamaquoddy Bay fisheries. And the ground fishery is not at all like it used to be. And one of the reasons is that the St. Croix River was a food factory. It has dominated by ponded water naturally and with the dams that were built. And it has a huge area of spawning habitat for alewives, which require ponded water, more so than any river in Maine. The Kennebec and the Penobscot don't come close. It is twice the Kennebec potential and 1.5 times the Penobscot River potential to raise alewives. One of the problems is that it's split by a border, and that a lot of other rivers get attention. In Canada, the St. John River gets a lot of attention, and studies are paid for, people live along it. The St. Croix and Passamaquoddy Bay don't get the same attention. And in Maine, a lot of attention goes to the Penobscot River, where we went through a restoration effort, removed 2 dams, bypassed another, and a lot of fish populations rebounded. Then there's been a lot of attention to the Kennebec River, where we removed a dam and opened up 17 miles of river. And now we're talking about taking out a few more dams to increase the runs. So in the old days, before dams were built, the ground fishery was strong, and it was right along the coast when the fish were running. And then as dams were built, the food for the ground fishery started to diminish. And the more dams that were built, the less there was to bring the ground fishery to shore. And now it's no longer right on shore during the migration period in the spring. In the old days, before European contact, cod weighed around 100 pounds. Now we think of a large cod as, a lot less than that. So the St. Croix's ecological role is with the St. Croix, with the Passamaquoddy Bay as a food factory. And so what we would like to do is produce enough juvenile herring to send trillions out to Passamaquoddy Bay to supplement the food supply out there for the ground fishery, the marine mammals, whales, and that would benefit everyone who lives around the bay, the Indian community, the Canadian community, the US community that would like to benefit economically on the bay, and also it would benefit the recreational industry, the tourist industry. Passamaquoddy Bay is a beautiful place, and it is where the Passamaquoddy Indians and the Pestamagati have lived for centuries, thousands of years, millennium. It is their homeland. So they are tied to fish. Around 1825, the first dam was built at Salmon Falls, which is the first falls on the river. There are 17 falls. None of them look like Niagara Falls. They're all like a class 2 rapid that a kayak or a canoe could go down. And the first one is Salmon Falls, and it's right at the head of tide. The first dam there was built in 1825, and it did not have a fishway. And it didn't have a fishway for several decades. During that period, the fish runs died out. By the end of the 1800s, salmon were near extinct. Then fishways got started to be built around 1880, and Maine took an interest in the St. Croix, and the fish commissioner saw to it that fishways were built. And some of the runs came back, not what they were. In the old days before dams, ships came from far and wide and harbored in St. Stephen to be filled with fish and lumber, other goods, to be taken off and traded. It was well worth their effort to sail all the way up to Passamaquoddy Bay and the St. Croix River for those resources. Dams started to be built in the 1800s to support the logging industry. And St. Croix paper was a beneficiary of that. And we had 7 dams, I think, built. Well, there are 7 major dams, but the dams at Woodland, Grand Falls, and up in the East Branch and the West Branch were built pretty much to support the logging industry, to float logs down the river. The bottom of Spedlick Lake is just littered with pulpwood. Pulp mill was built early in the 1900s, and Grand Falls Dam was built, Woodland Dam was built, and the water fouled. The water was foul during the 1800s, but from industrial waste going in. It got so bad at one point in the 1800s that salmon smolts that they were trying to stock could not survive. So the river underwent industrial development without the benefit of the environmental laws that we have today. And the water got fouled. Dams were built without fishways. Fishways were built that pretty much only salmon could go up through. And the river went generations in the 1800s without alewives, to the point where when they were interviewed around 1893 by the Maine Commissioner of Fisheries, they couldn't remember alewives being in the river. So when they started to come back, they thought of them as a non-native species. And that thought carried through all the way into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and is still there today in some people's minds. So when we started talking about restoring the river, the state of Maine closed the fisheries. They closed the fishways at Woodland and Grand Falls Dam. And then we had a run of 2.6 million measured at Milltown Fishway. Milltown Dam is the first on the river. Woodland is second. Grand Falls is third. And the state of Maine closed the fishways. The trillions of juvenile herring that were going out to Passamaquoddy Bay stopped being produced. Passamaquoddy Bay went into a nosedive, probably. No environmental analysis was ever done. There's no U.S. federal water in Passamaquoddy Bay. It's primarily Canadian. And what U.S. waters there are regulated by the state of Maine. The St. Croix and the Passamaquoddy Bay have been split by the border, and it tends to be out of mind of most people.